Thank you for joining. We are so happy you are here. My name is Lisa Coy, and I am with the Just-in-Time Training Network at the University of South Florida. And we are here today for the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center's Third Friday event, Closer Than You Think, Unmasking Familial Trafficking and Closing the Gaps That Keep It Hidden. And then I'm just going to give a quick bit of information about the Just-in-Time Training Network. So we are at the University of South Florida, and we provide training, resources, and information to agencies, foster parents, and other caregivers to help support them in their journey in foster care. So we believe that every child deserves a home that's filled with love and safety, and we hope that our resources will help with engaging caregivers to make sure that they can provide the best, safest home for children in foster care. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to our Third Friday program. We're so grateful that you've decided to, as one of our organizer presenters here, helpers said, it's a Friday during the summer, and there's over 500 people registered and over almost 300 joining us today. So kudos to all of you and thank you. And I know you're joining too because you know this is going to be a powerful presentation. So let me get to it. The Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center is your host and sponsor today. We are a local nonprofit here in the North Florida area and the Big Bend, as we call it. We provide services, direct services and care to survivors of both sex and labor trafficking, regardless of age, immigration status, or any other category. We've been doing this for 11 years plus now, and we've assisted over 300 survivors of sex and labor trafficking in our local communities. We provide care management, and I want to just say a shout out to Graciela Marquina, who is here on this webinar. Hi, Graciela, and I know you're going to be wonderful and always be helping us. Everybody, oh, hearts are coming up for Graciela. Graciela and Misha Allen are two on-the-ground advocates who do all this work, and I will say that the reason we do these webinars is to assist all of us in being able to understand what human trafficking is, what it isn't, so that we can get resources to survivors, so that we can help communities prevent this. So these, I don't understand, I can't see how you can do anti-trafficking work and not ground it in survivors' experiences and connect greater knowledge and education to what we're doing. So that's what we do. We do this with partners. The only way we get this done is with partners, because you know as well as I do, a two-year-old could be trafficked, as well as, you know, a man from India who's a welder. So you have to do this work working in community with many partners, and we certainly do that and welcome more. So those of you who are in our area and beyond, we always love to connect. We have a lot of rural areas, and unfortunately, one of the myths that's out there, right, is that people think human trafficking doesn't happen in rural areas. It only happens in big cities. So we know that's wrong. So we're always trying to do our best more and do that. We do tons of community education. We do agency-specific education. We've got a lot of stuff on our website. If you go to our website, which I'm going to show you in a second, next slide, please, you'll see not just a lot of free resources and toolkits. You know, somebody already asked in the chat, I saw, is this being recorded, excuse me, and yes, it is. All of our webinars are under the educational resources tab on our website, which we will put in the chat later. But you can go to our website. You already went there to sign up. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do that. And if you haven't, so you see we have a lot of stuff there. So, and know that we're going to be doing another Third Friday webinar next month. I'm just going to do the commercial now. Sometimes I wait till the end. But next month, Third Friday, it's going to be a webinar on forced criminality. And our presenters will be from Framework, which is the technical assistance provider for labor trafficking, because we know that forced criminality is a form of labor trafficking. So know that we're going to be doing that, and we'll be putting up information on that, but just know that that's going to be on the 21st, same time, 1 o'clock Eastern. Everything we do is free of charge. Go to the event page. You're going to also see stuff we take time to curate, really high quality, wonderful national stuff as well. So we always have information for everybody. Next slide, please. Daniela Deese is the last interviewee for our podcast that we have included on our podcast series. I really, really encourage you, if you're not a podcast person, to become one. Just subscribe, rate, and review to Imagine Freedom, where we talk with survivors of, and it is not to go through, the details of the worst things that ever happened to a person, but rather it's to have us understand better what human trafficking is, what sex and labor trafficking are, so that we can do better, so that we can understand and prevent. So Danielle is our last interviewee. She was great. I mean, I've listened to it 3 times, and I think she's amazing. So please take a moment to look at that QR code wherever you get your podcasts and join us on that. Okay, next slide, please. So we do all this work because it's important work. We have always, those of you who are with nonprofits understand the challenges around being a nonprofit, especially these days. So know that anything you can ever support us with in terms of a donation is so greatly appreciated. So there's a QR code for you to do that. And we are grateful. Every single dollar makes a difference. So thank you for that. Next slide, please. You can read the bio that's online, but I just wanted to say a few other things about Hillary, and she's going to talk more about what she does and who she is. But you might notice from that bio that Hillary Evans wears a lot of hats. She's an advocate, she's an educator, she's a lived experience expert, she's a seasoned professional who's been doing this work for a very long time, and you can read more, as I said, in her bio. She does what we hope to do every day at STAC, which is to elevate the voices of survivors. Look at all these. I think there's a lot of Three Strands Global people on this call. Are you all Three Strands Global that are liking and loving Hillary as I would too, if I were you? So she does what we hope to do all the time, which is to elevate the voices of survivors who truly are the experts, so that everybody, whether you're in a school system or a healthcare system or the justice system or any of our systems, or whether you're in a faith community or whether you're in a neighborhood group, that we are going to be smarter and better at what we do if we ground our understanding in the voices of survivors like Hillary, who is just so talented and so great at expressing what you're going to hear. You're going to see this. I'm not going to say any more about that. I just wanted to say too that I've been really honored. It's only been a little bit of time, Hillary, that we've had a chance to connect. I'm so grateful to Holly Nadell, who is here, and Holly, who has been part of our STAC family for a long time. Holly, I see you're on board here. Thank you very much for introducing me to Hillary. And in this presentation, you're going to see exactly why I'm over the moon with Hillary being here today. And also because this issue of familial trafficking, and y'all, we've been doing this since 2020, these webinars. We have never done one on familial trafficking. We've certainly mentioned it, but it's a pastime. And I have a feeling in my soul that the reason we waited was because the right person was going to come and do this presentation. So she's a truth teller in the world of human trafficking, where there's so much misunderstanding and so many myths. And I can't wait to work with you more, Hillary. And I thank you very much for being with us today.
Robin, thank you so much. It is a joy to have gotten to know Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. I'm so excited to be here today and excited to get to share just from my experiences, both professionally and personally. And to all who have come, thank you so much for joining us today on this Friday afternoon. Also, before we begin, I just want it to be said that we are going to talk about some heavy stuff, and specifically stuff that maybe, people closest to us have that it's happened to us maybe. And so it's heavy. It may be personal. If so, please care for yourself first. Step away, take a deep breath as you need to. That is always okay. And as always, support is available. As Robin mentioned, I've been in this space for over a decade. My journey started in the Philippines, actually, and I worked in an anti-trafficking nonprofit that I founded, largely because of my lived experience. I knew I had my bag of stuff, just like all of us, and but I only knew trafficking from an international context. And then as I dove into my career, I started learning from more of a legal framework, and I started diving into the definition and realized, oh no, my bag of stuff. I'm a survivor of trafficking, specifically familial. And so I've been able to, over the years, as I've been in professional spaces, be able to share some of that experience to hopefully bring better systems, better processes, and support. But something I'm very passionate about is person-centered, trauma-informed work, but understanding trafficking beyond what we've seen in the media, beyond what we've seen in the movies. It's far more than somebody going on a Euro trip and being kidnapped. And so that is something that you'll hear me talk about a little today. I work with Three Strands Global Foundation as the Director of Social Impact, and Three Strands was founded in 2010 with 11 mothers sitting around a kitchen table wanting to end human trafficking. They were wrecked by a local case that happened, and since then our mission has been to prevent, empower, unite, together ending human trafficking. We've been in this space for 16 years with survivor-led programming and on prevention, and our prevention programs have reached 50 states. So today we're going to dive into what is familial trafficking? What's the definition? What's the scope and the dynamics? We're going to talk about some of the myths that are at play that often keep it hidden. And then why does it go unseen? What are the gaps? And sector by sector, how can we close those gaps together? We're then going to talk about prevention, a wraparound model. And I'm going to dive into some of our programs that we offer and resources that we offer. And then talk about what does a coordinated response look like within your role. All right, so what is familial trafficking? So we're going to name it. We're going to define it today. The definition of familial trafficking is when a family member or caregiver exploits another family member or enables someone else to do so for sex or labor in exchange for something of value. So I read that, but now I want to break it down because oftentimes when people think of familial trafficking, they automatically will go to, well, it's all children. And that's just not always the case. Additionally, I want to break down this exchange for something of value. So many times people will think that trafficking only includes an exchange for money. And the reality is it can be anything of value. So you're looking at an exchange for maybe a relationship, babysitting, basic needs needing to be met, shelter, drugs. It doesn't have to be just monetary. And so I think that's really important when we're diving into this, to be able to kind of expand our understanding of that piece. Familial trafficking is a betrayal of trust. In the context of this presentation, we are going to focus in on child familial trafficking, but know that it doesn't have to be just children. It can be anyone with a disability or someone who's vulnerable within a family context. But for children specifically, the people in the child's life as it goes for family, they're supposed to protect children, right? And so it's so hard to see and it's so hard to name because there's love involved, there's loyalty to the family involved, there's fear involved. And so we're going to break down some of those things today. Another picture that we have in our heads at times, or maybe that, we've had in the past, is that, it's a stranger in a white van. And the reality is it's far closer than that. We long gone are the days where we are stranger danger. Yes, we need to be aware of our surroundings. Yes, things can happen with strangers, but the majority of the time, children are not taken. They are recruited, they are coerced. That's a very important word that we're going to talk about. And they're sold by someone they know, often at the hands of somebody that loves them or that they love. And so it's a very confusing thing when you're working with children who may be being exploited by their families. When I dive into statistics, I want you to understand that familial trafficking is badly underreported. And these statistics are only as true as what has been reported, right? And so understanding that this 41% of child trafficking situations are facilitated by family members is actually probably a lot higher. It's actually 4 times higher family involvement in child cases than in adult cases. And in a study that Polaris did, they surveyed 457 survivors, and 37% of those had experienced familial sex trafficking. Oh, sorry. So now let's dive into the dynamics. Coercion. Coercion is highly relational. So when you have a child that is being exploited by their family, there is love involved. There's loyalty, like I mentioned. There's guilt. When I was a kid, all I wanted to do was please my parents. All I wanted to do was please the adults around me. And so it was very hard to even understand that what was happening was wrong. We've also been given the picture that trafficking is locks and chains. And, that's just not the case. There is this deep need to be loved. That is a basic need that a child has. And so you'll do anything to be loved. And so that coercion is very easy to miss. Harm is normalized. And so, what happens when a child is in a home where they are being exploited on a regular, recurring basis, day by day, they may not understand their situation to be abuse. That was my situation. I had no understanding that what was happening to me was wrong. And it is often driven by need and cycles. So you're looking at poverty, addiction. I know in my lived experience, my family, there was a lot of abuse in my family. And so it's cycle being repeated, trauma being repeated across generations. And then this one's really important when we're talking about familial trafficking. The abuser controls the narrative. Because they speak up for the child in school settings, in doctors, agencies, they steer the narrative. They have that control. And oftentimes, abusers can be highly respected individuals within the community. And so they wouldn't even dare think that this is happening. And because we have these understandings of trafficking from a media context, it's hard for us to think that this could happen in families. I get it. That's a hard reality to want to accept. So what are the stories that keep it hidden? How does this hide? So we're going to break down the myth and the reality. We've already touched on this, that traffickers are strangers who abduct kids off the street. Again, abduction is the rare exception. I want to bring attention to even when there is an Amber Alert. When you look at Amber Alerts out there, oftentimes if you see the last name to last name, it often causes me to say, this is not an abduction. It's not an abduction. There's a relationship there, right? And so I hope that there can be this understanding that traffickers use trust, they use access, and they use their power. So a caregiver, there is a power dynamic there. Another family friend or family member that is in charge, babysitting, like you're taught to mind, you're taught to obey. And so understanding that makes it really hard to identify. But at the same time, we've got to understand that traffickers use that trust and access. Those are the tools to groom and manipulate. This is one of my favorites to debunk because I hear it often. I live in the suburbs of outside of Dallas, and I live in a great, quaint community. It's beautiful. It's like you go at Christmas time, it's like the Hallmark version for downtown, and it's just beautiful. It's a great little town, but I hear it often. I hear it just doesn't happen in my community, not my town. I'm here to tell you it happens in every kind of family, every neighborhood, and most cases are not reported. Oftentimes because we have pigeonholed trafficking to be this one type of way. But there is no universal profile for a trafficker. There is no universal profile for a victim of trafficking. And so it's touching any income, it's touching every zip code. And again, appearances offer no immunity. Just because someone is a highly respected individual in a community doesn't mean that they can't be a trafficker. We only count a fraction of what exists. Truly, it is underreported. The next myth I want to talk about is that a child in that situation would tell someone or run. So this is very important because when we're looking at disclosures, there are two different types that I talk about. There are accidental disclosures and there are purposeful disclosures. And for me, in my case, I can count on a few times where I accidentally disclosed and it was missed. My first disclosure that I have memory of, I was 6 years old and I was in the hallway just kind of shooting the breeze with another kid and we were talking about what we did that weekend. And again, going back to the norm of what was happening in my world, I was just talking as if this was normal. And I was like, yeah, I kissed naked this weekend. And that was so just, I couldn't imagine why this kid told on me, but he told the teacher, and I'm thankful he did the right thing. But he told the teacher, and the teacher came to me and said, we don't talk about being in the nude. And she wrote my name on the board. And this was back in the 90s, so there's a lot of understanding around, trafficking wasn't talked about, abuse wasn't even really talked about, trauma wasn't talked about much. But the reality is children rarely disclose harm caused by the people they love and depend on. It's usually this accidental type of disclosure. And what I learned from that was that I could get in trouble for saying stuff like that. So I don't need to say anything like that. And the next disclosure that I had that was accidental, that was huge for me, that I was not prepared for, was when CPS got involved in my case, in my situation. So I was 12 years old. I had heard a sermon on True Love Waits, and I was listening to, just this message about how we should save ourselves and, we should, they passed around this rose and said, smell the rose, touch the rose, feel how soft the petals are. And then by the time this rose got around, they said, now who's going to want this rose? And as a 12-year-old hearing that and feeling, I felt tricked. I felt like, oh my goodness, I didn't know I was doing wrong. Like I had no idea. And so I thought I had sin to confess. So that was my disclosure. I was disclosing what I thought was sin and not this, I need help kind of disclosure. And so, the people freaked out. They didn't know what to do. They contacted CPS. CPS got involved, and I'll share a little more through a video in a few slides. But I say all that to say, again, because of loyalty, because of shame, trauma bonding is real. You have compassion for those that are hurting you. You love them. It makes it really hard to say, this is happening and I need help. And I think the important piece of this reality is that silence is not consent, and it's not proof that it's not happening. So now we're going to dive into warning signs and why it goes unseen. So we're going to look at the gaps, sector by sector. And before I get into this, there is going to be a video, but before I get into this, I want to make mention that I'm so grateful that you all are here and you're here to learn. And I want to say that there are gaps, and there were gaps in my experience that kept me from being able to get the help that I needed. This is in no way to blame any one person, one sector. This is just stating that we can show up as a community and we can do better when we learn about this, right? And so, again, thank you for coming. Thank you for just being here and wanting to do better in this space. There is another kind of advice, viewer discretion. So if you do need to step away, this is a pretty heavy video, but I hope you enjoy it and can learn something from it.
What would my life have been like if I had known? If I had known that the pain I was experiencing wasn't my fault. If I had known that I could genuinely seek help. What would my life have been like if I'd spoken up? If I'd even known how? If I had the vocabulary to describe the kind of help I needed? If educators had known that soiling your pants could be a sign of trauma instead of a disciplinary problem? If the CPS worker who investigated me and my family could see they were interviewing me in front of one of my offenders? The gaps in our systems are countless. Our society isn't designed for prevention. It's designed for response. By the time we respond, the damage is already done. Back in the 90s, I was disclosing abuse in the only way I could. Through my behavior, through fear, through accidents I couldn't control. And this is what I heard. Not again. Come on, let's get you more clothes. She can't come back to school until she sees a doctor. Do you want to be in diapers the rest of your life? Why won't you just go to the bathroom? Everyone asked why or what's wrong with her, but they never stopped to think what happened to her. No one understood that my body was screaming for help when my voice couldn't. No one knew that I was being exploited, that adults were gaining profit from my innocence. I don't share this story to place blame. I know many people did the best they could with what they knew. Some of you even showed me compassion. You gave me food, clothes, and care when I didn't have the words to ask for it. But we cannot settle for we didn't know anymore. We can build systems that recognize the signs. We can train educators, caregivers, and community members to see beyond the surface. We can equip children with the language, confidence, and support to speak up and be believed. That's why I do this work. That's why prevention education matters. Because every child deserves to be seen. Every child deserves to be safe. And every child deserves to know. No more what ifs.
Let's stop this evil before the crime begins.
All right. So the core problem with this, and I will reference some of these things, the signs are usually there. The problem is often that no one system sees the whole child. And so I want to break that down. So in my case, a teacher saw one piece and said, you know what? She can't come back until she sees a doctor. I was, peeing my pants every day. I was having meltdowns and bad hygiene. And so there was concern, right? And so in that space, the teacher said, can't come back until she sees a doctor. That was their way of navigating the situation. So they saw one piece. A doctor saw another piece, so I had to go to the doctor. Mind you, I got in trouble for that because it was another system that my parents were having to navigate. And so in that space, I was spoken for, and I was told, the doctor was told that I was being lazy and I just didn't want to go to the bathroom. So there weren't questions that were asked. So, things like, I was asked, why won't you go to the bathroom? And in that, I didn't know that I could say, it actually hurts to go to the bathroom. It hurts to sit down. I'm having like, this is hard for me. It's not that I'm doing this to be a problem. But I didn't have those words. And then by the time, the church was involved, they were seeing a side, and then a caseworker seeing a side of it. But here's the thing, the one that has the narrative, the one that's in control of it, is the one person that has all access, right? And that's the caregiver, the abuser. And so they're the only ones that connect them all. And so when they're speaking for me, that makes it very difficult for us to really see the whole picture of what's going on. So the hard truth, why don't children tell? Going back to that myth is that if something's happening, they'll speak up. And that's just not the case. We talked about the love that you have for a family member. Protecting the parent feels way more urgent than protecting themselves. Fear losing everything. So, I was right before I was interviewed by CPS, I was told that I would never see my family again. And so that was what was familiar to me, right? And familiarity oftentimes feels safer, even though it's not. Familiarity feels safer than disclosing and losing everything. And then they may not have the words. I never was told about safe relationships, what safe felt like or looked like. Healthy relationships, grooming, none of that was talked about. And that's why prevention education is so important. The other thing is that I learned that adults don't act. Past attempts went nowhere. Even though they were accidental, I learned I could get in trouble. I learned that I had to protect my family. I learned that, this was something that I couldn't talk about freely. And so I shut down. Now, what do we look for? So we talked about it in the video a little bit, but I'm going to dive into a little bit more around what you see. And what I want to say is that no one sign is going to confirm trafficking. No one sign is going to be, oh, that person's experiencing trafficking or that child is experiencing trafficking. You're going to want to watch for clusters. You're going to want to watch over time before you act. And so you want to see like maybe a controlling caregiver. So somebody that does speak for the child, someone that won't leave them alone. Behavior shifts. So for me, it looked like in elementary school, I had those behaviors of peeing my pants, crying, meltdowns. I was hyperactive, so I kind of looked like I had ADHD. And then in middle school, I shut down and I became more reserved, and I started pulling my hair out until I had bald spots. And so that's the shift that you're looking for. What changes? Maybe they were, attentive in class, and all of a sudden they're sleeping in class, or they're, cutting up and getting aggressive with others, having knowledge beyond their own age, again, going back to that comment that I made as a 6-year-old, unexplained money or items. So, if you've got a student or a kid that, their family circumstances, and that it seems weird that they're getting all of these gifts or cash or phones, that's something to pay attention to. And then scripted or coached answers. Rehearsed responses. So this, if let's say they're talking about it one day, and then all of a sudden they shift completely and they're more protective rather than talking about what they previously talked about, that's something to also take note. Something that we also don't talk about enough is memory issues with trauma. So because of trauma, memories can be repressed, or because it's so common, it can be just a normal thing that they don't really feel like that's something they should share, their story maybe doesn't add up, and they can appear like they're lying. And maybe they are lying because they've been told to protect the family or that they're going to get in trouble. And so their stories may not add up. It's really important not to place blame on the child and to just show up for that child, understanding that they are human and navigating a big world and big problems. And so to kind of stop and pause and be curious, question what happened rather than what's wrong. Frequent absences is another one. When there is chronic truancy, so many times truancy is actually absences are treated like a crime. I can remember when I was a kid and I had I had a lot of absences and didn't have explanations for them and tried to come up with explanations, and just I was treated like I was the problem, and I had to go to summer school. And what that does is if you're telling a child they need to come to school, and they may be, let's say they're working for the family, and you don't have that understanding. They're getting placed in truancy, taken to court, and then from that, if they have to go to summer school to make up the class, then you're keeping they're going to get in trouble for that as well at home. And so there's things about these situations, these warning signs, that we need to remember that there's so many dynamics at play within the home. Unmet basic needs. So neglect. I can remember in my journey of healing, I went to every teacher, every person that was in my life at that time, and just asked questions because I was trying to piece my experiences together because they were so fragmented. And I can remember talking to a principal and asking if they ever suspected abuse. This was the school that said I had to go to the doctor or I couldn't come back until I come back to school. And I remember her saying to me, "I didn't think that you were abused. I thought you were neglected." And we need to remember that neglect is a form of abuse. And whether it's intentional or unintentional, that's a different story. But paired with other clusters of these things, neglect is abuse. I think it's also important to know, there are certain signs that are physical that you can't overlook. You've got to dig in and ask what's happening. And we'll dig more into that as we dive into each sector. So the first sector I want to cover is law enforcement. So law enforcement, that training out there has been predominantly around a certain profile and what to look for. Oftentimes what we've seen is this neglect, or they're logged as a runaway or a custody dispute. I remember sitting in a advocacy center listening to a forensic interview I was interning at, and I remember this officer one time said, "Oh, it's custody. This didn't really happen." Well, the reality is, if we log it just as custody and we don't dig in, we're going to miss cases. And so how we can close that gap as a sector is trauma-informed, child-first interviewing. Treating the child, not the caregiver, as the source of truth, and having those screening tools like the child sexual exploitation identification tool available, having it flag familial trafficking and exploitation. Some gaps in child protective services. I was interviewed by CPS in front of one of my offenders. And I think that was really hard because even in the middle of that interview on a recording, I was told, I had the recorder in my hand and was told that I could go to jail for slander. And this was also prior to being coached. And so in that space, I couldn't speak up. And so I think having trafficking specific screening at intake is important. We also live in a world where, reunification is a goal, right? It's not the only goal. It shouldn't be the only goal. Reunification is a goal. Specific to cases around familial trafficking, kinship placement needs to be carefully determined. Reunification shouldn't be the primary goal when you're dealing with a case that's familial trafficking. Safety planning when it comes to reunification, especially when the caregiver may be the trafficker. So gaps in schools and around educators. So educators see students a third of the day. Your role is so important, and I am so grateful for the educators in my life. I know that there are many requirements on educators, and in all of these systems, it's overburdened, and sometimes it's exhausting, and I get it. I totally get it. But there needs to be specific training around trafficking, and instead of it being a box that we check off, it needs to be prioritized, because you're the ones in this space that see the children more than most systems. And so warning signs get read as truancy, defiance, or a behavior problem, and they're addressed as discipline. One example around this, in high school, they did random drug testing for certain things within the school, and I had this drug test and couldn't go to the bathroom. I had a UTI, which is also very common for someone with my lived experience, recurring UTIs. And in my journey of talking to school teachers and nurses and everything, this nurse, she apologized, and she said, I missed it. I thought that you were a teenager not wanting to pee in a cup. And is interesting. I physically couldn't. And so understanding how important this education piece is for students to understand and be given the language, for trusted adults in every building to know the signs and to know what to do in that space is critical. And then there's healthcare. Visits are brief. Visits are fast, and oftentimes the caregiver is there with the child and speaks for the child and stays in the room. And so you're missing the opportunity of really understanding, where did the injuries come from? Where did these symptoms come from? How can we treat them? And what's really going on? So to help close that gap, my recommendation from my experiences is really have routine private screening. Make it a standard practice. And if based on state laws, if you can't, there are ways, such as, maybe if you're having them do a urinalysis, have them mark with a red pen if they need help, so that there's a way to give help when needed. And then also having those referrals in place and an appropriate reporting pathway. Nonprofits and community. So community organizations, churches, you earn trust and see families up close. But having a protocol in place and understanding what trafficking is from an accurate point of view is crucial. So understanding the signs and having that internal response so that you can have a warm handoff with these partners. I often wonder what would have happened if there was a child protection policy in place for when CPS was reported. And maybe there was, but understanding how to navigate someone's disclosure in a trauma-informed way is critical. All of that to say, this wraparound support model surrounding the child so that there's no gap. Educators can see it early and safely respond. Healthcare can screen and talk in private as much as possible when there is that suspicion. And then child welfare, safety over reunification. And then the community, trust and warm handoffs. All of this surrounding the child at the center so that no one carries this alone. And prevention is this connected and coordinated response. The gap isn't one person, it's space between the systems that don't talk to each other. So, having a shared language, having training, and a community response is going to help in this space. I want to pause and give an opportunity for questions before we move to solutions.
I do not see any questions in the chat, and I'd ask, we didn't say this before, but Amanda and uh, I guess JC is here and Jenna from Three Strands Global to be part of our responsive team. Does anybody have any questions?
I can just really quickly, Hillary, for you before we move on, and unless I'll wait for questions, but you've got so much thanks and praise and solidarity in here. So I'll just read a couple really quickly. So I'm so sorry your teacher failed you like that. As a former teacher, there are so many things I wish I had known back then. I'm thankful you're advocating now. I heard the same analogy in church. Thank you for speaking up and being an advocate. And the entire world needs to hear this information. You make it easy to understand. Thank you. And then in solidarity, prevention education, amen. This should be given to all educators, period. So you've got a lot of thanks in here, Hillary.
Awesome.
And as we go through too, some have come in. I wanted to ask you, maybe this is the right time or you'll be saying it later, but you brought up how this, we always used to say, or many people still say, good touch, bad touch. But the problem with that, safe touch and unsafe touch, that was so eye-opening for me, Hillary. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, that's actually, thank you for mentioning that. So when we're looking at good touch and bad touch, good and bad has moral obligation to it, right? So if somebody is saying bad touch, it makes me, the person, the victim, feel like I'm bad. So safe touch and unsafe touch, understanding what safety is or what uncomfortable feels like or is, and unsafe is important. I think being able to define and differentiate is great because, again, you don't want the victim to feel like they are bad. The behavior that that person is doing is bad, but the victim is not.
That's so eye-opening, isn't it? Everybody, I mean, just how much we said that over time and how victim blaming it is.
Hillary, there is one question in here that I think you might want to address. So if a child says something that is going on, but then says, no, it did not happen, so they are flip-flopping, how do you know it did not actually happen?
That's a great question. I think we can't afford to think that that child is lying. I think that the research, there's far greater research to show that a child disclosing is actually truth versus a child making up something. And I think that as mandated reporters, as individuals who have the duty to protect, we can't afford to go there. We have to be able to report within good faith our suspicions and what's being said.
Yes. Another question just came in from, excuse me, Tracy. And y'all, I'm sorry, I've got this cold that makes me sound a little off. Tracy's asking, while wanting to interview a child without a parent or caregiver, that issue, she can only ask if she could talk with the child privately, but can be told no because it's the parent's civil rights that gets asserted at that point. So, do you want to talk about that a little bit? What else could be done?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's very unfortunate. I think what needs to be done is policy in place for that because when you have a child in front of somebody who has such a power dynamic as a caregiver or as a parent, especially if something is happening, I think it's very dangerous. We're going to miss a lot of cases that way. And so I think policy is important. I think that, you know, you're going to have to get creative and understand the case. Like, I think as we talk about solutions, I think it's important to be able to investigate what's going on at school, what's going on in the child's world around them, especially the ones that report it, getting as much information as you can. But I don't know, I unfortunately don't know the full answer of what to do when that is the law. That's unfortunate.
And part of this too, I think, is to talk with your partners now and try to work out what would be a good response. Maybe there's a proxy that could sit in, or somebody, a trusted person other than the parent might be there. But sometimes if you wait till when these situations come up, it's the worst time, right? So
Totally agree, Robin.
what can you do before? Someone said, what response would you provide to a victim of familial trafficking that is experiencing letdown from a police investigation?
Great question. Support, support, support. Just be there, listen, let them know that it's not their fault, that you're here, that if they have to be investigated again, that you can go with them to be that support. I never was investigated by law enforcement. So I know the fears that are involved around law enforcement. It's real. And so I think just as much as you can, DCF can request a forensic interview, 100%. In Texas, we have a law that mandates every investigation must be investigated through the Child Advocacy Center, through a forensic interview, a trained interviewer. And so as much as you can, absolutely advocate for that so that there is the trauma-informed response. So now I want to talk about prevention that works. So a coordinated response is always the best way for prevention. And so one of the ways that Three Strands has implemented prevention is through our Protect program. So this is our school-based prevention education program. So this is implemented across the United States and internationally. It's comprehensive, so it's age appropriate, building on each segment. We actually don't use the words human trafficking in kindergarten through fifth grade because we're wanting to build this understanding of what safety feels like. What's our inner voice? What is that? What does it feel like to when something's uncomfortable or feels unsafe? My heart starts racing, my knees start shaking. We want to teach those aspects, and then we build on it each lesson moving forward. But it's approved by the Office of Trafficking in Persons. We have been able to implement Protect in over 430 school districts across the nation. And what we have seen is the more that you are talking about prevention, the more you're talking about human trafficking and abuse, the more outcries you're going to get, the more disclosures, because we're giving kids language to be able to get the help and resources they need. It's survivor informed. It was developed by survivors alongside survivors and multiple stakeholders. It's now evidence-based through the CDC, and it's in Spanish and English. And what we have done in this space is really wanting to make schools understand that we are here to support them. How it works is we've got a 4-pronged approach. So we help schools establish a protocol if they don't already have one, or we provide guidance on their current protocol. But we create this coordinated, agreed upon response where everyone knows what their next step is. Specifically for familial, we also give specific ways to help and what next steps would be if there is a situation of familial trafficking where you're suspicious of the caregiver being the trafficker. We then take what we've done with the protocol and then we implement the training within the school district. So every school staff is trained on understanding what human trafficking is, what it looks like, and ways that they can respond if they suspect trafficking happening. After protocol and training are established, we then work with the school to determine who would best facilitate this K through 12 curriculum. And it's available 24/7 on our online platform for educators to implement, again, in English and in Spanish. And then everything we do is backed by research. And so we want to increase our understanding, our awareness, and behavioral change. We want to understand how that's happening. And so we've got pre and post data and some qualitative data to help us better understand how we can better our program, but also to know that what they're getting is working. Some stats around what we've seen. So the evidence, when people have knowledge and options, traffickers have none. We have to be smarter than the trafficker. That's the reality. And so out of 888,000 students reached across the nation with Protect, 99% of students recognize the signs of human trafficking. So this is key. And 96% of school staff are confident in the steps to report after they take Protect. I think this is really important to note that we did undergo a CDC study, and of the school that went through the study with us, 98% of school staff were confident to take steps to report. And so it is consistent with what we're seeing across the board. Beyond our school prevention programs, we have got prevention that extends past that. For caregivers who need information on trafficking as a whole, so not familial trafficking specific, we cover all forms of trafficking. We talk through what the signs are, and we talk through what grooming can look like, as we know that online trafficking is rampant at this point. And so we want to equip parents and caregivers to be able to recognize the risk and to be able to respond and have open communication with their children. Out of our care program, 100% know how to report afterwards. And then we also offer a program called Aware. And so this is for a wider community to understand what our needs are as individuals and where do we have gaps of unmet needs and how can we get those met. Specifically for teenagers, this is helping them understand the vulnerabilities that they may have as a teen. And this is open to everyone and everywhere. So these resources are absolutely free. And this is just a layered prevention model with Protect at its core. Another program that I want to highlight is I'm so excited about this program. Some of the stats that we have, 40%, AHHS says that 40% of kids who have experienced trafficking are in foster care. And of those 40%, it's important to note that risk factor it skyrockets. About 79%, it was recognized that 79% of their trafficking happened while they were in the foster care system. And so we built a program to be able to wrap around support for youth, for caregivers, and for the professional, for the case manager, to be able to walk alongside the youth so that they could thrive. And this is through a partnership. Currently, we have a partnership with Elevance Health, and we are offering this program for free to the youth, caregivers, and professionals in the states of Virginia, North Carolina, and Kansas. But we also want to work with other states in this space because we believe this resource is critical for helping a youth thrive. So a coordinated response and your role. I think the important thing to note is that shared language is a must. So when every sector defines trafficking and familial trafficking the same, fewer cases get missed or mislabeled. And having those clear protocols and pathways, so written agreements, and to know which partner to pass to and fast and safely. And then really establishing a team around the child. Not one child can pass between silos, but professionals coordinating around one person together is what's going to impact and help in this space in a strong way. It's also important, if something feels wrong, you don't have to be certain. And so, this is very important to understand that it's not our job for some of us, it's not our job to investigate. We don't have to prove anything. And so, this kind of highlights that the person that was questioning, about the child who has autism, it is not our job to determine if a child is telling the truth or what they're telling is real or what's happening even deeper beyond that. We're not the investigator. And so it's important to contact law enforcement, contact CPS, pay attention to your state mandates. What are those state mandates? And then if you do suspect that familial trafficking is happening, don't confront the caregiver. This can escalate risk for the child. It can cause a lot of risk, actually. And so really the trained system needs to respond. When you're documenting, document facts, document dates, and direct quotes. Don't put your interpretations or your feelings in it, but just identify what you observe and what you see and what's being said. And then, again, give it to the people who need to take the next steps. And at the end of the day, prioritize the child's safety. So we want to respond in a way that doesn't put them at a greater risk. And when you're unsure, you can consult your protocol, you can consult the screening tool that you're using, or you can consult a trained partner, but always keeping the child's safety first. So doing your part. Learn the signs and share them. Feel free to share this recording. I know it will be on the website, so share it with your friends. Take it back to your team. Have a conversation. Identify, okay, where are there gaps in our organization or in our agency, and how can we close those gaps? Bring prevention education to your community. Maybe explore Protect for your school district. But connect your sector and your agency with a coordinated response. One of the best implementations that I've seen was actually out of Fort Worth ISD. I worked with that school district in Texas, and we put together a very comprehensive protocol where multiple stakeholders were involved and everyone had a shared language. And we just saw so many amazing responses take place because the safety was established, the coordinated response was established, everyone knew what to do. Doesn't mean that we're going to get it right every time, but we can do better each time. And stay connected and support the work. Continue to follow Three Strands Global Foundation or 3SGF and STAC to join future trainings. And again, as Robin said, we both are nonprofits. So if you feel led, contribute to the work being done, or find other organizations that you're passionate about supporting too. But this is a way that we can do our part. All the information of how you can get access to our programs is on this QR code. It has my email, my contact information, and we would love to have a discovery call to hear what needs you have, how we can help support, and what that looks like. We can dive in a discovery call of those needs and provide you a cost that is accessible and feasible for you. And we would love to talk to you about how we can get our programs in your hands and our resources. I also, Robin, gave you links to free resources. So we've got free learning opportunities on our empowerment site. And so feel free to go look at the webinar site that yes. Robin has, and you'll see the link to the recording. You'll see the link to those resources as well. And then we've also on there, I did put a Protect proposal on there so they can see the pricing and everything.
You just got a question about whether or not you're working in Africa, and in Sierra Leone, they're interested in doing this work. So I know I saw someone said we've got someone from Canada, we have someone from Mexico, we have truly an international. That's why it's Three Strands Global, right? Because we're global on this one.
We go international, so we will go where you are. So I would just recommend setting up a discovery call. We'd love to meet you. We are not currently in Africa. or currently in Mexico, but doesn't mean we can't be.
Hillary, one person wanted to know, is there anything you can speak to regarding reporting a potential disclosure for a family who does not have legal status? And how could this affect their safety in other ways?
That's one that I would have to do a little bit more research on. So I would love to get your contact information, but I would recommend that if there is a child's safety at risk, I would recommend going to CPS and reporting. Child safety is primary. I know that there are certain risks around that. Jenna, I would love your expertise on that as well. But
I would say it's really sensitive, and so I would talk to different national legal organizations that work within the space. So you could look to the National Immigrant Justice Center. They're based out of Chicago, but they do national work. The Human Trafficking Legal Center as well. And then you can also look to USCRI, which is the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. They're across the entire country, and they provide different case management and legal support for folks who may not have legal status as well. So that's who I would connect with. And Hillary, if you have additional resources that you want to provide after you do some research, that's great too.
perfect.
And it's also important to note, and we've certainly heard this from some other survivors, that even people who are T visa holders now are potentially at risk of deportation. So you need to, or they are at risk of deportation. There have been incidents where trafficking survivors have been deported. So this is a very, very, as you said, Jenna, a very delicate situation. And I think moving forward with legal counsel is really, with qualified legal counsel is really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a nuts and bolts question, Hillary. What's the difference between sexual abuse and familial trafficking?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the difference between sexual abuse is, did that exchange take place of something of value? So when you're looking at sexual abuse, a sexual act has occurred, and that is through, force. It's not the fault of the victim, right? But when you're looking at human trafficking, an exchange of something of value has taken place. So that sex act occurred in the form of for money or for drugs or for shelter. You need to do this and I will give you this.
Yeah, and the other part, yeah, the exchange is there. The other part I think is to mention that familial trafficking also includes labor trafficking. And you can have both sex and labor trafficking, or it can be just labor trafficking. So please remember that families labor traffic children as well. And that's probably more common than we know.
It is, yes, it is very common.
Hillary, there's two questions about getting prevention education in states. So they kind of go hand in hand. How do we get prevention education to be mandatory in all schools? And then how do we get this training approved in the states you mentioned? So I think they're talking about maybe elevate and rise training. Yep, in those states. Yeah.
So when you're looking at a state approach, I can share my experience with the state of Texas. We've got a very amazing partnership with the state of Texas. The Office of the Governor it just is amazing and putting together a state strategy. And so what I would say is line up, if there is a team focused on this, line up with what their state strategy is. And then from a mandate standpoint, most states have Aaron's Law or Jenna's Law that you could look to. I know that Jenna's Law added human trafficking, and so I think it's, many of them do have it. If you do not, then we would love to walk alongside you and get that mandate in place.
And can I also, I put it in the chat, but we had a presentation in February about Florida's law that does mandate this education.
Yeah.
So in our state, what I would say is everybody should think about this. Certainly you could talk to the Department of Education, but we're a very decentralized state. So if a county school board wanted to do something like this, everybody's under the umbrella of the law, but they're given the opportunity to decide how that's done with probably some certification involved. But I think there's a lot of power at the local level to implement this kind of a training. So anybody who wants to do this anywhere in the state of Florida, you should just try to figure it out with your local school board.
Mm-hmm. And reach out to us because we can support that entire process if you want help. So we have Protect is now in 16 states. And every single state was a little bit different in how we got in there. So we can help you figure that out if it's something that you're interested in. Definitely. Yep.
I just want to comment. There's a couple of quotes on here from Bridget that I really appreciate, and I do want to comment on that. You know, what I went through was very hard, and it's hard to navigate. But I can say that, you know, I'm much stronger as a person, and the resilience factor is there, and I wouldn't be without the support of my team who wants to champion what I'm doing, and my care team. I have coordinated care that I've been able to have. And to those who are organizations that serve survivors, the work that you're doing in this space is so important because oftentimes coordinated care can be very challenging outside of an organization. And so thank you for the work that you do. It's so important.
And the quotes that Bridget has in here are very, very impactful. You're not defined by the harm you endured, but by the strength you discover and the hope you protect and the future you continue to build. So thank you for that.
Hillary, what if the police or CPS are not willing to investigate?
That's really hard to hear. If they're not willing to investigate, then, man, that's a really hard one. I would be the squeaky wheel. Be the squeaky wheel. Like continue reporting. Because, and NCMEC, yeah, Victoria, absolutely. NCMEC is a great resource for the online exploitation piece as well.
And I wonder too, you can connect with your local advocacy organizations, your local legal services, because sometimes you can just kind of build that team that you're just talking about around. So yeah, it's tough.
I know in the state of Texas specifically that you can't directly go to a child advocacy center. It has to be through like the statewide intake. And so if that's not happening, again, report, and the National Human Trafficking Hotline as well as a resource.
Build your case.
Yeah.
Somebody is asking if Pennsylvania is one of the 16 states that has Protect. Do you know?
Yes, it is. Pennsylvania is one of the 16 states, but it's not statewide. I think it's a small section in Pennsylvania. So if you are interested in helping us expand in Pennsylvania, go ahead and reach out to Hillary and use that QR code. We'd love to work with you. And just one quick follow-up from that. Also, you know, our number one job is to keep that individual safe. And so you can also go to local service providers and work with them in figuring out how to make sure that youth is safe and they can continue working on that if CPS is not going to intervene. So just a plug to connect with your local service providers as well. There was one more question, I think, and I'm sorry if I wasn't able to get to all of them. This one is a little bit long-winded, Hillary. I know a woman who was kidnapped by a man in the neighborhood when she was 13. So essentially, from the time she was 13 through 21, she was brought throughout the country, throughout different states. But at some point, she came back. She was brought back to her father, and her father and the daughter and the trafficker lived with the father. And so the father was housing them for a while. And the thought was that the exchange was that this kidnapper still was financially supporting this child. And so they wanted to know if this is considered trafficking.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to that, I want to be clear that just because when I said kidnapping is rare, it doesn't mean that it doesn't occur in a trafficking case. So yeah, in that case, that is definitely trafficking.
And there's that financial gain piece
Yeah.
that's in there.
Yeah. Shelter, all of
it's-
that is there
right.
present. Yeah.
As well as harboring
Yeah,
someone.
harboring, yeah.
Yes.
Provision, harboring, all of that. Yep.
Okay, well, that's great. This has been wonderful. Thank you all again for attending. Thank you all, Hillary, Three Strands Global, Jenna, Amanda, JC, Holly. Thank you very much for making this program happen today. I have no doubt that many eyes were opened and hearts were opened as well. So thank you so much for this. And
You.
Hillary, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
I just want to thank you all for being attentive and encouraging and all of the just amazing work that you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Robin, for having us.
Oh, of course. And reminder to everybody, we don't have the registration link up, but on Friday, August 21, we will be having another program. It will be on horse criminality. So please stay tuned for that. If you haven't signed up for the Stack newsletter yet, just go on our website, surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. Sign up so you won't miss a webinar. All right, everyone. Thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend.